The Locked On Blue Devils end-of-year review series continues here today. We're talking about the captain, Jeremy Roach, and the season that he had for the Duke Blue Devils, and Mark Mitchell coming back for a sophomore season. What did he accomplish for Duke? Let's discuss that here today.
Hi, everybody. Dick Vitale. Hey, make sure you listen, man, to Locked On Blue Devils with J.J. Jackson. He's awesome, baby.
You are Locked On Blue Devils, your daily podcast on the Duke Blue Devils, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody, and welcome into another episode of the Locked On Blue Devils podcast. My name is JJ Jackson. It is so great to have you here with us on Wednesday, May 22nd, 2024. Locked On Blue Devils is your one-stop shop to discuss everything going on in the life of Duke athletics. We've got our end-of-year review series going on for the Duke basketball team, and for the third straight day, our good buddy Jordan Mann is going to be here on the show with us at J-Man's Takes on X. We're talking about the seasons that Jeremy Roach and Mark Mitchell had for Duke, and it's going to be a really fun show. Glad that you're making us a part of your day each and every day. Be sure to follow us on X at LO_Blue Devils. I'm there as well at _JJ_Jackson_. Be sure to follow and subscribe to Locked On Blue Devils for free, wherever it is that you get your podcasts. Also watch us each and every day on YouTube and leave us a 5-star rating and written review. So without further ado, let's bring him on in. It's our good pal, Jordan Mann. 3 straight days, brother, that we are getting to chat here, and glad to have you back once again.
Yeah, I'm just ready for Locked On Blue Devils with J.J. Jackson and Jordan Mann at this point. So,
Got to get Dick Vitale to give you a shout-out in the intro, J-Man.
Yeah, I need you to call some people to get that going for me. That'd be pretty sick.
Oh, man. So we got to keep these end-of-year review series going. We're going to talk about Jeremy Roach and Mark Mitchell here on today's show. Of course, check out Jordan's work with the Big J and Little J show and his YouTube channel at JMann_. Jeremy Roach is a player who made the decision to come back for another season for Duke. He had 2 years of eligibility remaining with that COVID season, and he decides after being a captain his junior year, after being one of only 2 people to say that they could play for Mike Krzyzewski and John Shire, that he's coming back for another season. How big was it for the Duke team that he was coming back for his senior season when you look back at it?
I mean, massive. Like massive. I mean, point guard, you're only as good as your veteran point guards, basically, in college basketball. And to have a veteran point guard with Jeremy Roach, and I mean, he went to the Final Four, obviously, we know that. And you need that leadership. You need a guy that's been through the trenches, and he's been through the trenches, and he's knew what it took to get to the Final Four. And he just came up 1 game short in his senior year at Duke.
Yeah, big season for Jeremy Roach this year, as we'll put the numbers on the screen for folks watching us on YouTube. 35 games played for Roach, so played every single game but one. Averaged 14 points a game, 3 assists, 46.8% shooting from the floor, and 42.9% from three-point range. It was his second season playing alongside Tyrese Proctor. Caleb Foster comes into the fold. So you look at Jeremy Roach, you talk about ball handling, you talk about getting into sets on the offensive end of the floor and that sort of thing. But the further into his career we got, Duke felt a little bit more comfortable with him just focusing on the scoring, being that good combo guard and letting other guys handle more of those traditional point guard roles. Is that what you noticed this past season too?
Yeah, I mean, the guy was so efficient, JJ. I mean, that junior to senior year bump was insane. I mean, he went from 34% from 3 to 43%, and then he went from 43% from the field to, as you see, 47%, and then the free throw jump, 78% to 84%. Like the guy, all 4 years of Duke, he improved incrementally, and to see it really go to what it was his senior year was special. I don't know how he can be better than this at Baylor. Like truly, 14 points per game on 47, 43, and 84 splits is insane, and it was fun to watch.
We'll get to, obviously, next year for Jeremy Roach, who's going to use his final year of eligibility to play for the Baylor Bears. When we look at him, the basketball player, what part of his game specifically is your favorite?
Oh man, his mid-range game.
I figured you'd say that. Yeah.
I loved his midi. I mean, the way he could snake ball screens and have his defender on his hip and then just shoot over top of a 6'10" guy that's trying to now get in his way, his little fadeaway. I call it CP3-esque because he's fading away over taller defenders. But I'll miss that mid-range game that he had coming out of pick and rolls.
It felt automatic going back to the 2022 Final Four run that Duke had and some of those games down the stretch, making big shots for the Blue Devils. He made some tough shots in that game against Houston this season in the Sweet 16 to send Duke into that Elite Eight matchup against NC State. But yeah, what a player he was, particularly when he got to his spots on the floor. And he's a 2-year captain for the Blue Devils. More freshmen coming into the fold this year, more guards in particular, and he felt comfortable by this point, Jordan, in terms of kind of being somebody that those younger guards could look up to and could kind of learn the game from, learn what it means to be a Duke basketball player from as well.
Yeah, I mean, he was a really good leader on the court. You could see that he really helped Caleb Foster with his game, McCain's confidence. Like you said, year 2 with Proctor, and I never thought he was going to come back. Like you said, we'll talk about his Baylor stuff. I thought this past season would be it for Roach at Duke. It's going to be weird to see him at Baylor, but I'm happy for him and grateful for his 4 years at Duke. He was a hell of a player, and like I said, improved all 4 years, and that's what you want out of your team captain.
How would you grade out the defensive performance this year for Roach?
I would probably put him like at a B overall.
You're always honest, and I appreciate that. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you're an A, like I really don't know anybody that's an A. Well, we'll get into that later, but yeah, I would say a B plus.
Got after it. I mean, despite his size, was able to do a good job. Give me a little bit why a B. What impressed you about the defensive end of the floor and what was preventing him from taking it to the next step? Was it simply his size, or did you notice anything else?
I mean, just some possessions in games where he would gamble when he shouldn't have gambled, being like a senior leader at times. And like you could see it by his reaction and like Jay Lucas's reaction, who's like Duke's defensive coordinator on the bench. Like you can see their conversations. Like that's just stuff that I pay attention to as a senior leader. And then, okay, the assistant coach that his priority is defense. They're talking, something's happening. And then, yeah, just sometimes he would gamble that he shouldn't have and it bit him. But other times, like he came up big for Duke on the defensive end.
Any favorite moments or favorite games, favorite plays? Like when you think back to this season and you're somebody, Jordan, who you look at a lot of clips, man, and you get out there on social media, as people know, like what are you going to remember about the season for Roach?
Honestly, there's not a game in particular from Roach.
I kind of feel that way too. Yeah.
It's more of just he was a workhorse the whole season, and he was consistent. And like I'm looking at his numbers now, and I wish we'd have talked about this prior because I never really thought about it. But I wonder if his legs were tired once the calendar hit March. I mean, he was the UNC game March 9th March 9th to March 31st. He was 3 of 12, 1 of 6, 3 of 10, 5 of 8, 5 of 14, 5 of 13. And so guy shooting 47 and 43 and 84 splits all year. And to see like the last 5 out of 6 games, he really struggled from the field. You got to wonder if his legs just gave away. And I mean, he gave it all for a senior year at Duke, and that's something that I always thank him for.
And I feel like from time to time, obviously he played all but one game this season. There were also moments where he had some nagging injuries that he was playing through, and I could picture mentally, the footage of him walking gingerly to the sidelines from time to time during games and that sort of thing. So you're right. I guess we get to March and you get to a certain point in the year where it's like your body knows that the end is in sight and it just decides to start to give out on you. Yeah,
that's true. And didn't he like jam his finger or something against Vermont or JMU, one of those 2 games? And so he had to deal with that. And that just shows that nobody's healthy in March. Like even when they are healthy that we know of, they're always going to be banged up. But look, he gave it his all. He was a half away from having 2 Final Fours in 4 years at Duke. Just a really solid career for Jeremy Roach. And he'll be one of the most underrated guys, I think, in Duke history when you look at the accolades like that.
Not too shabby. A 4-year player, wart number 3 on his back for his entire 4 seasons. And excited to see what's next for Jeremy Roach. We'll talk a little bit more of that in just a moment. We're also going to talk about Mark Mitchell and the season that he had for the Duke Blue Devils. And we're going to do that with Jordan Mann when we come back after our first time out here on today's show. All right, Locked On Blue Devils here today is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. It's the formula for winning championships, and it's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything that you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with the eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or you get your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. Let's keep going forward here on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils. JJ Jackson joined today by Jordan Mann. Tell me about the Big J and Little J show. 3 days in a row, maybe somebody's catching you for the very first time. What does that mean, Big J and Little J show? What kind of content can they expect?
Yeah, I mean, the Big J stands for a journalist. That's Connor. Little J stands for fan. That's me. It is funny that I am the Little J and I'm taller and bigger than Connor, but it's fine. But, yeah, like that's what we talk about, Duke basketball, Duke football. This is day 3 now on this podcast where I'm going to talk about the Tyrese Proctor breakdown that I'm going to have out. I promise it'll be out by the end of this week, I hope, this weekend. But, yeah, just that's on my YouTube channel, jman_. But the Big J and Little J show is a podcast you can find on Apple, Spotify, and my YouTube.
Without a doubt, go check it all out. And again, on X at JMan's Takes. So let's talk about Mark Mitchell and the season that he had for the Duke Blue Devils. Another player that following his freshman season makes the decision, says, you know what, I want a little bit more college basketball. I'm going to come back for my sophomore season. What did that news mean to Duke? If you go back to how you were thinking in May last season, like, wow, we just had freshman year Mark Mitchell. Now he's coming back for another season.
I mean, he gritty. Like, he didn't mind getting in the mud. We'll talk about that for this season too. But, like, he was a guy that just – when he wanted to play hard, he was the hardest playing guy on the court. It wasn't the most consistent, as we'll talk about, but knowing that when he was coming back for a sophomore year, that was something I was optimistic about. I was like, okay, Duke has this guy that is going to bust a toe offensively and defensively, and he'll guard 1 through 5. And so that's something I was very excited about, Mark Mitchell coming to a sophomore campaign.
All right, so 33 games played for Mark Mitchell, meaning he missed 3 of them, 11.6 points per game, 6 rebounds, 54% shooting from the floor, and we got to put it up there, 27.5% three-point shooting to start the season as we're going through the course of the year and evaluating the year that was for Mark Mitchell. A horrific, tragic, just terrible start, three-point-wise, for Mark Mitchell, who was pretty good in that area his freshman season.
Yeah, I mean, look, even though he shot 35% his freshman year, he shot 54 threes. So you knew it was a small sample size. And everybody saw the hitch, and we're hoping that in that offseason it was going to improve. It just didn't. Like, the whole shot, the whole thing is just there's a hitch, line drive. Like, if you blink, you're going to miss if that ball goes in or off the rim. And I call it like the exit velocity, like a baseball batter. It's like the ball coming off an Acuna bat, just hard as a rock. But look, besides that, like, he found other ways to score. I mean, he had multiple 20-point games for Duke this year. But the problem with Mark was the stat that I wish I knew the real numbers to these. I always exaggerated, but Connor O'Neill does a fantastic job. Obviously, the co-host of the Big J and Little J show. The Big J. Yes, the Big J. Talking about Duke's record with Mark Mitchell when he scores 10 or more points, and then when he doesn't. And I think Duke ended up being like 33-5 when he scored 10 or more. Yeah. And then they were a 500 team, like 17-15 in his career if he scored less than 10. And that's not good. Like, that's a cool stat, and it's cool. Like, oh, Mark Mitchell scored 10, Duke should win. It shouldn't come down to that. Like, there for a guy that only averaged 11.5 points per game. Obviously, there was a lot of games where he was in the 6 to 8 points per game mark, and you got to win. You got to be a factor in other ways of basketball if you're not scoring.
And obviously, in terms of scoring, shooting helps get you to that point. And when you're struggling to shoot like Mark Mitchell was from the outside, it makes things a whole lot worse. I remember our conversation last year going into the sophomore season. We're talking about, we're probably going to see a little bit more of Mark Mitchell driving to the rim, having the ball in his hands, a little bit more playmaking, and just being an athlete with his big frame. We see how athletic he is on the defensive end of the floor. But, I mean, here's the question. Did that play out this season? Did we get to see Mark Mitchell, the athlete, on the offensive end of the floor much at all?
Well, it's hard to say, JJ, because the way that you can tell that if he was able to play was finish around the rim, which he was, I would say he was above average, which isn't great. Like in Duke standards, anything that has average in it is not up to par for Duke because Duke is Duke. So everything needs to be good or better. And for him to be 6'9", there's a lot of times where he would bring the ball down and he'd get blocked by a guy that's 6'5" because he's shooting from his shoulders instead of finishing high. And that was the most frustrating part about his game. Like 3 points aside, I don't care about that because his bread and butter needed to be finishing around the rim. And he struggled with that at times. And then also, if you're around the rim score, you have to be a good free throw shooter. And his free throw percentage went down from 76% to 62%. And if you can't make it around the rim, then you get fouled around the rim. It's not good when we're going up there thinking, hey, just make one of two, and that's a win for Duke, because that's honestly the win for the defense when you can hold a team to 1 point on a possession, not 2 points.
And, the shot is something that we talked about all season, and I think that's what we're going to remember a good bit when you look back to the season for Mark Mitchell and what he was able to bring. Clearly missing those 3 games, you didn't love seeing that because at times it felt like Duke had an inconsistent starting lineup. We'll talk about the 6 starters that John Shire mentioned frequently throughout the year with Mitchell and Roach, McCain and Filipowski, and then Proctor and Foster. Mitchell was a guy that we felt would be super consistent in what he was going to bring night in and night out, looking back at what he was able to do as a freshman, but that was just not the case. If you're watching on YouTube, one of the photos that we've got displayed here for Mark Mitchell is, ironically enough, Jordan, at the free throw line itself, and you kind of mentioned the dip in the free throw percentage. There's a big dip in the three-point percentage. People talk about kind of the janky form that he's got. Even looking at the photos here, the ball just never really looks that comfortable from your college playing days, your coaching experience, and that sort of thing. Why is that, man? Why does he look kind of so uncomfortable with the basketball?
It's just the hand placement. Like the one he's at the free throw line, you can't really tell, but there's like a still shot of his. Basically, I'm right-handed, so I have to do it this way. But you want your offhand to be on the side of the ball. His was always on top of the ball. And so when he'd shoot, it would get in the way of the trajectory, and it's just that needs to be down. And I don't know why it never was. It's not something that's easy to fix. Like I said, like if you wanted to really break down his game, it's going to be
It's a habit that's built over time, right?
Correct. It's childhood. It's going through the growth of middle school and high school. Like it's going to take 6 months to break that down. It's not going to take 6 weeks of an off season. It's going to take a season, basically.
This guy played at Duke for, it's a McDonald's All-American. We're not downplaying anything that Mark Mitchell is as a play. It's clearly worked, but you get to a certain point when your skill kind of evens out with the other players around you, and to take that next step, these are the type of things we think that Mark Mitchell probably needs to develop moving forward. So I guess lastly here, defense is what he was known by his freshman year on the floor. We talk a lot about, the only game he misses was that Tennessee game in the NCAA tournament, and Duke falls and the season comes to a close. What did we get from Mark Mitchell defensively this year, do you think?
So I do think he was right there on the border of if we're grading to 100 scale, I'd give him a 90. So I'd give him like an A-. Like he's right there because that's what he was. I mean, that's what Mark Mitchell, when he played hard and he played defense, like when he was on like the Houston game, I loved Mark Mitchell getting down and dirty. Like I loved his just tenacity. Like he owned Notre Dame this year for Duke. I think he had 23, 14, 8 of 12, 2 of 2 from the free throw or from 3-point line, and 5 of 5 from the free throw line.
And I'll say in his freshman year, remember, he had that big corner three to win the game for Duke late against Notre Dame. So I think he just loved playing against the Fighting Irish, man.
Yeah, I mean, he's lucky. I guess that's what he is. He's lucky against the Fighting Irish. But, I mean, look, like I know I was basically kind of criticizing. It was more so of a scouting report for Mark Mitchell, but there's value in his game. And honestly, the non-Duke side, I am disappointed that he went to Missouri because I thought he's better than Missouri. I know the whole NIL thing, and people would say, well, he got paid X amount of money. I don't care. You go from playing in Cameron to playing for a winless basketball team that the fans aren't going to be there for a random Wednesday night conference game unless it's Calipari and Arkansas coming to town. You got to think about those aspects of college basketball and stop thinking about just the money chasing, because that's sad. I wish he would have played at Kansas State. He's from Kansas. Would have loved to see him play at Kansas State.
Yep. A little closer to home, going to Missouri. The story there for both of these guys that we're reviewing today, Jeremy Roach and Mark Mitchell, they still have seasons of college basketball left. They had NBA draft decisions to make, and Duke basketball fans know that they have decided to play college basketball elsewhere for this next season. So what's next for those two guys? That'll be our final few moments on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils. We're back with Jordan Mann here in just a moment. Taking this opportunity to tell you about Locked On Sports today. Our company, Locked On, has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV Channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every single league. Find Locked On Sports Today now, available in the free Fire TV Channels app. As we bring back in my good pal Jordan Mann again from the Big J and Little J show, we teased it. We've already mentioned that these two guys are playing basketball elsewhere. Mark Mitchell is heading to play for Missouri. Jeremy Roach heading to play for Baylor. We'll start with Roach first once again. The decision to leave Duke. Rehash that one more time for me, if you will, Jordan.
Yeah, I mean, he's played 4 years at Duke. He was either going to the pros or the portal from my educated guess, because 4 years at Duke's long enough. 4 years at any program's a long time, unless you're Amonde Baycott or anybody like that.
Perry Ellis.
Yeah.
Davis, yeah.
Yeah. But, all jokes aside, so I knew he was going to, rightfully so, cash a ticket. Am I going to test the NBA waters where he's probably realistically a second-round pick for his size and what he brings, or can he really cash the Duke brand and get paid? And I think Trilly Donovan reported that it was over $1 million that he was getting, that Roach was getting at Baylor. That's what NIL is for. He deserves that type of compensation because of what he's done at Duke. Like I said, if he would have went to 2 Final Fours in 4 years, and with his shooting splits last year, that makes a lot of sense. And they're going to be dangerous, dude. Normad, what's his name? The center for Miami.
Yep. Normad
Yeah, they're going to be loaded, and so it's going to be a good fit for him. And Scott Drew's a heck of a coach down at Baylor, and I'm excited to watch him play at Baylor. It's going to be weird, though. It's going to be so weird, but I'm excited to watch him.
Yeah, especially when you have those 4 years with somebody, and the mental images that we've got with Jeremy Roach, always a part of the brotherhood, goes and plays at Duke for 4 seasons. So excited to see him go on to that next step and then see what that pro career looks like for him after the fact. Of course, Duke had that St. Paul, the 6th connection with Jeremy Roach, and then Trevor Keels. Now it's Darren Harris and Patton Gamba. So he kind of led the way for them in the charge there from that school. So Mark Mitchell goes to Missouri. He enters the transfer portal after 2 seasons at Duke. How do you think he got to that decision? How does Mark Mitchell get to the decision that I'm leaving Duke?
I think the writing was kind of on the wall. His game, I always compare him and Malik Brown, because similar games, like I said, Malik Brown, 127 field goal makes, 120 were around the rim, but he can win games for Duke not scoring 10 points. Malik Brown will be an impact player for Duke. That 5 points, 6 rebounds, 3 steals, Duke wins because of his defense and his consistency. Mark Mitchell just was inconsistent at times, which was look, we talked about it yesterday. I talked about Filipowski being inconsistent. Guys just were too inconsistent for Duke. And the way Duke has went in the portal, they're getting veterans that have been consistent throughout their whole career, if not this past season. So Duke's looking for solidified starters, and Malik Brown fits that mold better than a Mark Mitchell. But Mark Mitchell, like when he's on, dude, he can play. So he can be a good piece for Missouri.
Let's see what's next for both of those guys, for Roach and Mark Mitchell. A good season altogether for Duke this season. Duke makes their run to the final, or to the Elite Eight, with both of those guys. So Mark Mitchell, Jeremy Roach, last thoughts here today. Jordan, how are you going to remember these guys and the years that they had for Duke?
I mean, I remember Jeremy Roach, just big shots, like big shot Bob, Robert Ory. That was Roach for big shots, and they all seemed to be in the mid-range. And that's what I remember him most, mid-range guy. And Mark Mitchell used to just kill Notre Dame like we talked about. He was the lucky Irish against the Irish. So I remember them for those.
And the jump shot, right? I mean, it's unique. It's weird to look at. Like, I think that's probably a mental image people will have moving forward. I
did give him the nickname Marksman Mitchell, and I was playing that as ironic, but I will – like, it's funny. I don't know how I'm going to remember him other than that, because, like, I have a hard time remembering some Duke players. Like, I'm not going to lie to you, like 2020 team where I'm seeing, like, Jamin Brakefield and I'm Henry Coleman. I'm like, oh, my God, like, this is a great trivia question. Matthew Hurt. I watched him in the G League last year, and I was like, oh, my God, that dude played at Duke. So it's just – I think I'm the old man now. I turned 30 this year, and I'm forgetting some players for Duke. But I'll remember those two at least.
All right. I'm excited to see what's next for those guys. And, Jordan, excited for the work that you put in this week here on Locked On Blue Devils. 3 straight days, man. Like Jeremy Roach at the end of the season, you might be slowing down after me having you on here 3 times a week, man.
Yeah, I think I need to go ice up. I need to get in the cold tub and eat some Chick-fil-A.
See you, brother. Thanks, Jordan.
I'll see you, brother.
All right, that's Jordan Mann joining us here on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils. Great stuff, as always, from him. Very appreciative of his time. That's going to do it for our show here today. As always, go Duke. I'll talk to you tomorrow. My name is JJ Jackson. Thank you, and good day.